In this lesson, we will learn how to test our HTML and CSS code in different browsers and devices. The first half of the lesson will focus on browser software, and the second half of the lesson will be a bit more fun. We will review how to test our code on different screen sizes, so we will approach testing from a responsive point of view. But let's begin with browser software. In previous lessons, we learned that not all web browsers and devices will display or render our pages exactly the same. Even amongst the most modern web browsers, each rendering engine has its own unique set of quirks and characteristics. This means that designers and developers can't simply have one web browser installed on their computer. We can code our pages using best practices, and we can do our best to keep our pages accessible. But at the end of the day, there is no true substitute for simply testing or loading our pages into several different browsers and seeing if we notice any bugs or issues. So in this lesson, we will be reviewing free, simple techniques to test your pages in the world's most popular browsers and devices. So let's start simple. On the computer that you are using to write HTML and CSS code, make sure that you have all three of the following web browsers installed: Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, and Opera. These three web browsers are available for both Windows PC users and Mac users. If your computer uses Windows, make sure that you also have the most recent version of Internet Explorer. If you're using a Mac, make sure that you have the most recent version of Safari. Now you may be wondering, if I have a Windows computer, how can I test in Safari? Or vice versa, if I have a Mac, how can I test in Internet Explorer? Well, there is good news and bad news. Let's start with the bad news. Short of owning a Mac, there is no way to test in Safari. Now towards the end of this lesson, I will describe ways for you to test your pages in Safari if you absolutely need it. But for 9 out of 10 developers, I will simply say that I wouldn't lose sleep over not being able to test in Safari. This is for two reasons. One, Safari accounts for less than 3% of global web traffic. And two, up until very recently, Safari used the same baseline rendering engine as Google Chrome. So if I was using Windows, I wouldn't worry about not being able to test in Safari. Now let's transition to the good news. Let's talk about testing our pages in Internet Explorer. Whether you're a Mac user wanting to test in Internet Explorer, or you're a Windows user, but your personal computer uses the most recent version of Internet Explorer and you want to test in older legacy versions, the website modern.ie will make your day. It might even make your week, month, or year. This website offers two primary features. Number one, a free screenshot service, and number two, a library of free virtual machines. Let's begin with the screenshot service. So when you visit the modern.ie website, you can paste in the URL of any website, and modern.ie will spit back screenshots of the URL that you entered as seen by all sorts of different browsers and devices. Currently, the modern.ie website will deliver screenshots viewed through the newest version of Internet Explorer, a Google Nexus, a Samsung Galaxy, an iPhone, an iPad, and even a screenshot of Safari running on Mac. This is great. Screenshots can be very helpful. But the real strength of the modern.ie website is the wealth of virtual machines that they offer. Now, while most web developers will tell you that they have nightmares about older versions of Internet Explorer, this doesn't change the fact that for certain projects, for reasons outside of our control, we still need to support legacy IE. Not on all projects, not on most projects, but every now and then, an odd project will come along and we'll need to support IE7 or IE8. Now, these older versions of Internet Explorer are bursting at the seams with inconsistencies, quirks, rendering bugs. So no amount of static screenshots are going to help you. You need to actually be able to load your page in one of these older browsers and be able to move your mouse around, scroll, click, hover. And this is where virtual machines come into play. The modern IE website offers virtual machine files of Internet Explorer 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now you can download these virtual machine files, plug them into a free tool like VirtualBox, and you can have a second mini virtual computer running within your computer. So let's imagine that you are either running Windows 8 or Mac OS X, and for some reason you needed to test your website in Internet Explorer 9 running on Windows 7. Well, that's not a problem. Modern IE offers virtual machine files for every Internet Explorer Windows combination you can think of. So we've covered how to test our HTML and CSS in different browsers. Now let's review something that is a bit more fun. How can we test our code for different screen sizes? Throughout the course, when we discussed responsive web design and screen size was a popular topic, you will remember that I would resize my browser window quite a bit. I would simply click and drag the corner of the browser window and resize it manually. Now, manually resizing your browser window is a great way to visually demonstrate to someone that your website is responsive, but it's a terrible way to actually test your website. Instead, I recommend that you rely on the Google Chrome web browser's developer tools. So once you've loaded your HTML page into Google Chrome, look in the Chrome menu for View, then Developer, and finally Developer Tools. So that should open your developer tools. Now whether it opens in a separate window like this or snaps to the bottom of your window like this is not important. If you want to switch between the two, look for this icon. Now we've looked at developer tools earlier in the course, but in this lesson I want to touch on something a bit more advanced. In your developer tools menu bar, look for a device icon. If you hover over it, it will read Toggle Emulation Enabled. So click on that. I'm going to resize this panel. And now, with a single click, I can choose to emulate any of these devices. So let's choose the Apple iPhone 5 and refresh the browser. And you can see that it automatically creates the perfect viewport size to simulate an iPhone. And you will notice that my mouse cursor is no longer the traditional black arrow, but is instead a circle. So Google Chrome is even simulating that this is a touchscreen device. So I can scroll by clicking my mouse and dragging. And I do not see hover styles when I hover over one of these links because touchscreen users don't see hover effects until they actually click on something. So not only does Google Chrome resize the viewport to the exact dimensions of a device, but it's also doing all sorts of spoofs in the background to pretend that it is that device. Now, obviously, this is not a 100% accurate representation of an iPhone. Nothing can ever take the place of testing on an actual physical device. But during development, when you're still constantly tweaking your code, or for projects that aren't absolutely mission critical, Google Chrome's developer tools are a lifesaver and are often eerily accurate. So I strongly encourage you to experiment with Chrome's emulation tools. Now I want to transition into the final topic of this lesson, and that is testing in certain browsers or devices for projects that are absolutely mission critical. So in cases where screenshots or Google Chrome developer tools will not cut it and you actually need the genuine device to test on, because you will get fired if your website looks weird in a certain device, you may not be able to find a free service to achieve the testing. Now in this case, you can perform a web search for cross-browser testing. There are many different services and products that will give you remote access to systems and devices that you do not own in real life. So this way, even if you own a PC, you can test in Apple Safari. Or if you own an iPhone, you can test on an Android phone. Now these remote access testing services are not free, so I'm not going to recommend any particular one of them. But now that you know these services exist, you can seek them out if you need them. And that's going to bring this lesson to a close. Cross-browser and device testing can be a bit discouraging at first, but after a while you might even begin to enjoy it, like a weird, sick, twisted game. I will see you in the next lesson.